the Cricket Podcast.
Hello everybody and welcome to the Cricket Podcast with me, Ross Legg. I'm joined by Dan Weston, who is in a car. It's like an episode of Top Gear.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, how are we doing, Ross? You good?
Yeah, I'm alright, mate. Do you want to tell the world where you are?
No, I'm in the glorious climes of Las Vegas right now, and enjoying the rather warmer weather here. Got up to about 95 the other day, which is about 35 for Celsius people. So pretty good, enjoying the IPL though as well, because there's been some unbelievable matches, haven't there?
Mate.
Like honestly, I've never seen anything like it in terms of like the closeness of the matches has just been insanely good.
Yeah.
And I was ashamed today has deviated from that a little bit.
Yeah, well, sometimes it just happens, but it has been freak after freak after freak game, and we saw, well, it's fair to say, some pretty good cricket, I think, overall. Harry Brook hit a century. The guy who cannot play in the IPL, but according to some people, hit the first century of this year's edition. He's the only person to do so. He's pretty talented, that lad. But today on our IPL Q&A show, we're going to cover Mr. Harry Brook. His middle name's like Chennington or something like that.
Cherrington.
That is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. We're going to cover Rinku Singh, who I keep calling Pingu Singh, if you remember that cartoon, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Gujarat Titans grabbed another tasty victory over your former employers, Dan, Punjab Kings. And then we'll do questions from our dear audience members. Let's start quickly, however, with our Serious Cricket sponsorship, who provide the best cricket equipment in the UK. They've given us 10% off using code TCP23. Cricket bat, helmet, pads, spikes, whatever you need, stumps, scoreboard, whatever. Use code TCP and get 10% off. They've provided all our gear, and they're bloody great. We've already had someone in the chat say you're down as Jack Hope. It's because Max and Jack sodded off on, I think, I don't know, they might be on a date, they might be on holiday together that I wasn't invited to.
Like a double date?
I don't know, but I wasn't invited, and neither were you, Dan. So they didn't even leave me with graphics to do this thing. So I'm Max Rowe-brown, you're Jack Hope, and we're just going to get on with it.
Who is it to be better, Jack or Max?
Oh, that is a good question. Maybe that's one for the audience members who are live. So who would it be better? Would you rather be Jack Hope or would you rather be Max Rowe-brown? You've kind of got an Ed Sheeran lookalike and a Daniel Radcliffe lookalike. So it depends if you're a big Harry Potter fan.
Or would you rather be a Mumbai fan or a CSK fan?
Dan, should we start with the mighty Sunrisers, who the sun is rising, I think it is fair to say.
It is, yes. Go for it. Yeah.
But Harry Brook, well, they kind of made life difficult slightly for themselves in the second innings, but it was a game in the bag, right? They were over 220. They were, pretty amazing.
I think that what we said before the tournament in all our previews is now kind of becoming true, in that we thought Sunrisers would be pretty good and we thought that KKR would be pretty bad, and I think that after meandering down a path to get to that point, we're probably not far off that now. Harry Brook was look. I know. Obviously, I've listened to a few of the pods that I haven't done, and you're obviously kind of very, very jokingly saying, "Oh, what a waste of money," and he's no good, and all that stuff. And of course, he's a very good player, and we're definitely one of the biggest young talents worldwide. The thing for me is whether he's worth the money. I mean, you can be a very good player and still not be worth the money. There are plenty of other examples of that as well. And I think that's the question mark for me. But obviously, unbeaten century today to bat through, fantastic. And obviously that will give him the world of confidence after a tricky start in the tournament so far.
Yeah, there was some controversy on Twitter earlier this week where Jack decided to tweet about Kohli and slowing down, about going for milestones, and Simon Dawn had called it out, right? Here, there are people saying, oh, well, Harry Brook did exactly the same thing, Joss Buttler did the same thing, Rohit Sharma did the same thing. And here, if we look at Harry Brook's strike rate per 10 balls, which is from Aries, who's one of the cricket podcast friends. First 10 balls, 250. Second 10 balls, 170. 21 to 30, 60. And then it's 210, 210, 200 for the remainder up to his 55 balls that he faced. Some people can read that and say that it was a spin choke between kind of in the middle piece. It was quite a mature way of playing, I thought. Like the way in which Kolkata Knight Riders are geared up, I thought that actually Sunrisers matched them really well. Markram was really aggressive and I love saying it's a captain's innings because it was a captain's innings. He kind of jumped on that grenade but really did well. Abhishek also provided that foil for them as well. And
it makes a mockery of why he hasn't been playing.
Absolutely. And Harry Brook there at the other end being just like, right, when the paces come on, I know what my job is. And he took down Lockie Ferguson for a load of runs. I think it was 23 off the over. Hitting a 55 ball century. There's not much criticism there, is there?
No, and I think that there's a big difference. I think Jack might have mentioned this on the last pod on Wednesday that I listened to. Is the big difference between a Joss Butler and a KL Rahul or a Virat Kohli slowing down. The Butler tends to pick his matchups a bit more, and that's fine. Whereas I think that it's now reasonable to say that Kohli very, very rarely scores at a high rate against spin, or even tries to. So whereas Butler will do it against certain spinners that he thinks he can take down. So there's a big difference. And I also think there's a huge difference between a Kohli or a KL Rahul slowing down for a milestone, because they've had loads already, and Harry Brook slowing down for a milestone when he's had a terrible start to the tournament and cost a load of money and wants to get his first 50 or 100 in the IPL, which is a huge achievement for him. I think that's completely different, and the context of the situation is certainly something that should be nuanced. Now, if Harry Brook is a 34-year-old and has scored, 20 hundreds and 50s or whatever it might be, just plucking numbers out of the air, and he still slows down for milestones, then that's when you can level the criticism at the guy. But first time round, I don't have a major issue. Well, I have an issue with it, but I can understand it. And this is why I like someone like Will Smeed, for example, because he's been out a lot in the 90s, but he's consistently gone for it. He's consistently looked to still hit boundaries when he's in his 90s. And yes, that means that he risks getting out, but it also means he's playing for the team. So I've got a lot of time for that. So less milestones, more team play, please.
Nicely put. And there's also a bit around the spin choke element to that, is that Sunil Narain is an elite level spinner, right? And actually, it's good that Chakravarti's found a bit of form. He was a bit rubbish last year, but has found a bit of form. And Suresh has been a nice addition. He's both simultaneously good and bad.
I'm not a buyer.
I was about to say he's simultaneously good and bad at the moment. And I think that do you think it's been the almost surprise factor of not seeing him early on, and then people have gone,
Definitely.
hang on a minute, he's just bowling googlies here with the odd leg spinner in.
Yeah, so this is something that we talk about in cricket a lot. People call it sight unseen, and yes, when a new player comes onto the block, you will often get the benefit of there being no data or no video on you, and then as soon as he goes and takes up 3 for 30 in his first game,
get me the India team.
Everyone's gonna, we've now got video on him, and we now see what he does. So now, progressively worse returns. I think for me the biggest problem is going for over 9 and over in the tournament. Now, obviously, you never want to write off a player who's not even turned 20 yet, but I'm not a buyer of him as an IPL standard player right now. Let's see how it develops. I'm not saying you never write off a 19-year-old, but at this point in time, looks a bit off the mark for me.
Yeah, I mean, cutting your teeth in the highest level is always a difficult thing to do, right? And there is a bit where you look at this KKR lineup, and I think there's probably some slight improvements that they can make on the 11. I don't think Suresh is the worst person to have in that 11 if they're going to have spin-friendly decks. Today was not a spin-friendly deck at all. It was a kind of true pitch. Dan Dre Russ, he is obviously a buccaneering juggernaut, is probably how I'd describe him. So his returns so far this season with the bat have been very poor. He was bowling here today, took 3 for, but they need to be stopping this guy from bowling if he's kind of made out of glass now at this point, and surely just almost having him a designated hitter, especially with the introduction of the impact sub.
Well, look, he's been arguably the all-rounder of this tournament since, for the best part of the whole tournament in the 15 years that it's existed. But it looks like we're coming to the autumn of his career, if not the winter. And as you say, kind of made of glass a little bit. Bowling wise is a risk for him. But I'm not sure that you can justify his price tag and returns right now if you're just using him as a hitter. So he kind of has to contribute with both facets, really. And look, you can be a great player and you can be in decline. I think that there's probably a pretty fair argument to say that there are others in this situation as well, such as David Warner. And look, that happens. That happens in every sport, Otherwise, Michael Owen and Wayne Rooney would still be playing up front for England. It happens. So look, what cricket teams need to be better at is to kind of predict this decline a little bit more and not give one big contract too many, which I think a lot of the time you can accuse them of doing.
Yeah, there's definitely that loyalty factor, isn't there, especially at the auctions. Dan, I mentioned earlier Rinku Singh. I think you said at the start of the tournament, kind of Shubman Gill, Rinku Singh, we were talking about who's potentially going to be a standout player for KKR. And he's doing pretty well, isn't he?
Yeah. Well, he's got the intent, which is half the battle, really. So generally speaking, as a rule, as a player increases the standard of cricket that they play in T20 I'm talking about, they will generally be able to largely maintain their strike rate, boundary percentage, etc. Because that intent and the intent in power is generally sort of stamped in their mindset already. Whereas the difference in standard is more reflected by getting out more often. And we've seen, though, with Rinku Singh now, is that he's been able to transfer a really high level of intent to the IPL. And when it comes off, it's a beautiful thing to watch, as we've seen several times so far in this tournament.
Yeah. I just like the fact that he's a bit of a lottery player, but he's becoming nice. He's becoming more consistent, and as you say, showing that intent. And the KKR kind of game plan of kind of see what we can do, and hope someone at the end kind of fills the void. He's fitting in nicely to Dre Russ's big shoes. The only other bit of it was for today. I thought Sunrisers, it was a banker for them. They had to win this game. They did really quite well. I think it was a difficult pitch to bowl on. Some of their bowlers did better than others, but they've almost stumbled across here their best 11, I think. And Harry Brook opening up after a couple of struggles in the middle order, I think, kind of provides that. And they looked like they had a bit better role definition here. And the genius of Brian Lara is starting to get this Sunrisers lineup to sing, aren't they?
I'm not sure it's necessarily down to that reason, but they are looking like a pretty competent unit. I think there's still issues. I'm not massively convinced on their pace bowling options right now. I think that they could struggle a little bit against better teams in that area. Bowling wise, I think generally is probably more of an issue than batting wise, but their batting lineup certainly looks pretty strong. They look one of the better teams, I think, in this competition. As I say, a big win for them, because going 1-3 in a tournament is when only 4 teams qualify out of 10 is a hurdle that's often insurmountable.
Yeah, terminal in some cases, isn't it? Well, I think that kind of summarises that game. I think the fielding was absolutely shocking today. There was multiple drop catches. There was loads of things where you're just like, my nan could have stopped that from going to the boundary. But that is the beauty of the IPL sometimes. Dan, we've also got another game that happened yesterday. Your boys, Punjab Kings, or previous boys, Punjab Kings.
Former employers,
They What I've got written here is that Punjab Kings find ways to lose and Gujarat Titans find ways to win.
I mean, that's a reasonably fair assertion. Or you could turn around and say that yet again Punjab Kings have been Rahul Tawatiad. I think that's 3 times now. So you had yesterday, you had the 2 sixes for an impossible situation last year, and then you had the game at Sharjah where he chewed up a load of balls and then took Sheldon Cottrell for about $1 million. So yeah, he's done it a few times against Punjab, and obviously seems to enjoy playing against them. Yeah, let's get on to Punjab, I think, at some point. And I think, for me, I think they're tactically pretty weak right now. I'm going to be really honest. I don't buy, but I'm not a buyer of Trevor Bayliss as a tactical genius at all. And I think that we're seeing this a little bit now with the questionable usage of impact subs. And I think you guys mentioned it the other day. The 3 overseas kind of thing seems a bit. I don't get it at all. I've got to tell you, I don't get it at all.
It screams to me that they've not done their proper planning, right? If you don't go with your 4 overseas, they're your cheat cards, or they're your trump cards, aren't they? Really, that you've got. Like, this is how strong we are. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's often the case with cricket teams. Is that the cricket teams just generally aren't very well planned.
Yeah, it seems to kind of lurch from game to game kind of a little bit at the moment. And with Punjab, you've obviously had that snake dream with Prabhasham Singh. He's had 2 ducks in the last game. One of our questions from VJ, I think it was, saying, have you had any more dreams recently?
No, sadly not. Although I did see a snake the other day in downtown Las Vegas. You could hire it, and you could kind of get it round your neck for a period of time.
Love it. But when it comes to like their lineup, again, it just leaves a lot to be decided. It feels to me they've got more strength than they're showing here, Punjab Kings, and they're just letting themselves down a little bit.
Yeah. Well, Livy's going to be a big boost to that.
Yeah, he turned up and was injured almost immediately, right? Or was ill or something along those lines.
Yeah, apparently pulled a muscle. I don't know. Look, I think that the other decision is they're ditching Nathan Ellis, which has seemed really weird as well.
Yeah, it's been probably their most consistent performer with the ball, other than Arshdeep Singh. And I get that you've got a big name in Kagiso Rabada, but at the same time, there's space for all of them here. I think they've got.
You just play Tava Taide instead, and you can structure up with a bowling heavy lineup. Yeah.
And there's just again that piece of kind of big names in that space, and take a choice out of Matt Short or Rajapaksa if who you want to pick. But
agree with that.
Yeah, I just think they should be going bowling heavy, leaning in, because having Ellis, Rabada, Sam Curran, Arshdeep, and Chahal, that's a strong set of overs you got there. Quite possibly the strongest bowling lineup in the tournament, if not in the top 3, definitely.
Well, certainly you have death bowling locked, yeah. And instead they're doing this kind of weird experiment with Rishi Dhawan, who just kind of looks to be like playing a bits and pieces role as a sort of semi-impact sub. I don't really understand that. And then Shah Rukh Khan as a luxury sort of number 7 who doesn't bowl is another issue as well in terms of balance. So I think that they can structure up completely differently. I would look to say, as you say, pick one of the top order batters, and ideally it would be Livingston. So you have Livingston, Curran, Ellis, and Rabada as the 4 overseas, and then you've got good domestic batters, Jitta Sharma, Prabhasam Singh, Shikhar Dhawan, and you use someone like Atava Taide, who I think has got quite a nice upside as a domestic batter, and then you've got an unbelievable bowling lineup, and then you can sub in, say, like a Shah Rukh Khan or something like that as an impact sub for when you're batting.
Yeah. And it makes more sense. So I think what we need to do is our listeners need to go onto Twitter right now and say, bring Weston back, and just say that to the Punjab Kings social media accounts.
I think that's already happened. So,
and Dan, the Titans just keep finding ways of winning. This team sometimes doesn't make quite a lot of sense on paper, but they've got an elixir. I think whatever they've bottled up, we need that across the world of what they've done. Shubha Gill is looking a decent touch as well, continuously this year.
Yeah. So yeah, he is looking very, very good. I think I picked him as the leading run scorer for the tournament in the pre-tournament predictions. I think I've said this before, and it sounds harsh, and I don't mean it to sound harsh, but the best thing that happened to them was Kane Williamson getting injured, because it enabled them to then play Josh Little and Alzari Joseph in the same team and go really bowling strong. And you look at this today, that they've used 5 bowlers, and they've all bowled the full quota. There's no messing around in terms of like 6th, 7th bowlers and stuff like that. For me, it looks pretty clear that even though I don't necessarily think that they're a great team on paper, they've got good role clarity, and that's generally a very, very good thing in T20 cricket, and it can go a long way, and it clearly is here.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And then also they've got Hardik Pandya there, right? If they need someone to bowl, he's not exactly the worst option to have as your 5th bowler or 6th bowler.
I mean, imagine not retaining Hardik Pandya but choosing to retain Rohit Sharma instead.
Well, it comes back to loyalty and misplaced loyalty is probably where we should put it. Dan, I think it was a bit of a scrap, the Punjab Kings game. Twatia gets them across the line. Today's result for Sunrisers means that it's still relatively tight, I believe. Rajasthan Royals obviously sit at the top. Lucknow sits second. The Titans are in third. Kolkata Knight Riders are starting their slip down the table. They move into fourth. CSK have, I think, been relatively consistent performers and got Rajasthan Royals has performed really well against them. Punjab Kings, as you say, again, kind of in that middle bracket. Sunrisers so important winning here, so they don't go 1 and 3, and then you've got RCB, MI, and the bottom dwellers, Delhi Capitals. Dan, let's shift to questions. We've had a couple in from our Patreon. If you want to join Patreon, go to patreon.com/thecricketpod, where you get access to our Discord, which is off the chain at the moment because of the IPL. And it's a global thing. We've got people from all over the world, and that means whenever you wake up or whatever you've been at work, there's always things going on. First, though, the Cricket Podcast is sponsored by Manscaped, and you, dear listeners, get 20% off and free shipping worldwide when you use the code CricketPod, which is on the screen right now. The Performance Package 4.0 has well and truly arrived. Inside this package, you get the Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, Weed Whacker ear and nose trimmer, Crop Preserver ball deodorant, Crop Reviver toner, whatever you need for your testicles, Manscaped provide it for you. And that is code CricketPod for 20% off at manscaped.com. Dan, when it comes to questions, first one up, we'd already asked, which was VJ saying, have you had any more dreams? His second one was to me around, is this the end of KL Rahul? And actually, I'm going to pose that to you, Dan. I think he's just having a bit of a lean spell. The guy is a run machine. He needs a bit of a slap around the face, I think, to go strike rate is important, mate. But where do you sit on the fence for now? Do you reckon Lucknow are winning despite him being completely void of form?
I think that was definitely the case the other day. They won despite him rather than because of him. And I think that he needs to get rid of this mentality that he needs to do it all himself, ultimately. It just doesn't really make any sense to me.
Yeah. Overinflated ego right there.
Well, based on the comments after the game, you'd say that might be the case. We would have won even easier if I'd have stayed in. As opposed to a guy coming in and smacking about 300 strike rate off 20 balls. Yeah, sure you would have done.
Well, it's frustrating as well because, well, it's not frustrating. It's quite nice. When we started this podcast, 3-4 years ago, he was the first person where we were just like, this guy, like, scratch beneath the surface, you're lacking. And it's quite nice when a prediction comes off.
Yeah, absolutely.
Second question from Dave, who was also do you see there being a chance in the 2024 mini auction of a team to successfully overhaul like Sunrisers Hyderabad have done?
I think it's really difficult. Ultimately, teams don't tend to release premium domestic players, so they're going to have to. I mean, Sunrisers are in a position where they released someone like Williamson, who took up a big chunk of their budget, which then they could redistribute. And there might be a few teams who can do that, like a CSK might do that with Stokes, or an MI might do that with Cameron Green. So yeah, it's possible, but they're very, very difficult domestically in particular.
Yeah. So we'll switch to Twitter now. Atom asks, should the IPL implement a rule to name one under-23 player in the starting 11 in order to give more exposure to younger talent?
Okay, interesting question. I saw this on my Twitter feed come up, actually. And obviously that's something that they do in the PSL. And they will, the PSL is the emerging player. It's been really kind of polarised over the tournament in recent years, because you've got kind of a mixture of some teams who are like unbelievable at doing scouting and they find like potential gems, and then you've got other teams who are just like pick some random kid who's like so far off the pace. It's pretty crazy. So I think most teams, I mean, perhaps CSK might argue differently. I mean, but most teams tend to have a player, or at least one player around that age bracket. I know that my teams that I work with have generally had that dynamic in terms of, you know, worldwide as opposed to just an IPL. So yeah, I think it happens enough without it being forced. The other question is, and the other debate is, whether it devalues the quality of the tournament a little bit if you have almost like a less quality player in because you want to have an age quota. So yeah, I'm not a massive fan. What I would do is I would change the impact rule a little bit and have 5 overseas, or have 5 overseas to start with, because if you have 5 overseas, it has the same amount of domestic players as roughly as it did as the league did when there was 8 teams and 7 domestic players. So that's something that I would like to see.
Cool. Parav has asked in the live chat, why is Livingston not playing? We covered that a little bit earlier. He's got a slight injury where he landed, particularly he pulled a muscle. Hopefully he's back for the next game, as Punjab desperately need him.
Definitely.
Navneet asks, mainstream media is becoming much more aware of kind of match-up strike rates, etc., and actually talking about them on commentary. Captains have been talking about planning with data analysts in their post-match and pre-match conversations. How long do you think it's going to be until we start seeing kind of, remember Owen Morgan and Nathan Lemon with the old code up on the sidelines, etc. How much more prevalence is that going to start to get? I still think there's a lot of maturity to go, but we're seeing more and more of it now, aren't we?
I'm not sure you're going to get analysts holding up cards necessarily. Although you do get, I know of bowling coaches who hold up cones to tell a bowler what their recommended delivery is, for example. So this stuff maybe does go a bit under the radar. It does happen. You know, someone on a balcony doing that is not unheard of. For me, I think it's all about the captain and the coaches trusting analysts to give coherent, evidence-based rationale as to for decision making, and certainly, I mean, I've been lucky enough to work with a few coaches who have trusted my input, and the hope would be that if they got jobs somewhere else, then you go with them, and then you create that kind of a bit of a team where you go around the world with certain coaches, and which is obviously that Morgan Lemon kind of scenario, you know. I personally think that an analyst is devalued sitting on a balcony on their own. I think that the insights that you can give a coach or a captain live is what's sitting in the dugout with them is more useful, and
that's more similar to your setup with Birmingham Phoenix, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I'll have like live data coming through from the match, and then as the match develops, if I feel that there's anything that warrants discussion with the coach or the captain or anyone else, then or one of the backroom staff, then I'll mention it, or they might come to me, or we might have a chat a few minutes before we think that there might be a strategic timeout or whatever there might be. So that already does happen. It's just not particularly publicised, really. I think that and as a rule, I think that it will grow more and more. I think it's still fairly slow to take off, but I think it will.
Okay. Dan, we've got a question here around the impact sub, and I think Shrikrashan has asked this one, and I'm going to slightly shift it. We said, which teams do you think is utilising it most effectively at the moment, and also which teams are not using it so effectively?
Well, I think we can answer the second one. We've already done that, haven't we? Punjab have struggled with it. Look, I think most teams have used it in a fairly, in terms of the role at least, a standardised way, lengthening the batting if they're in certain situations if they need the extra batting depth, if extra bowling depth, if they need the extras. It's been very much of a template so far. I think was it Sunrisers who didn't do it the other day. They Klassen was kind of left on the bench padded up because Tripathi and was it Sundar I think it was who chewed up a load of balls. And if they'd have been told to go a little bit stronger, more aggressive, with knowing that they're Klassen as the impact player, and that's very rare for the batter to come in that situation. But it's certainly a scenario where they could have kind of bucked the trend a little bit. I hate the 3 overseas. Don't get it at all. I'm going to do some work on impact players, and I would be amazed if I found that it was a particularly strong strategy. Statistically, I'm talking. Ultimately, I don't. There are coaches that I really respect for sure. Someone like Andy Flower is certainly up there for me as one of the best T20 coaches is in world cricket. But I think it's a bit like captaincy. You've got sort of 5 or 10% who are really good, 5 or 10% who are really bad, and then like 80 or 90% who just kind of sit in the middle. And I think that you can say that about coaches as well a lot of the time. I don't genuinely don't see a lot of them being like some tactical genius.
Yeah. That's fair. I must admit, I had reservations about the impact sub, but I think it's added a nice dimension to it.
I remember this.
Yeah. And I was a little bit just like, is it really going to work? Is it going to devalue it? But actually, what we're seeing is I think especially with 10 teams there being, I think it makes things far more interesting, and I can see next year them kind of just going, do you know what? Let's do it for the overseas players as well, because I think they're going to realise that it's going to add more spice to the mix.
I think that it does, because you've got, ultimately, being with the greatest of respect, how much of an impact is your 6th best bowler going to make? Not much. Very, very rare that they'll have a massive impact on a match. Yeah, but your 6th best batter or your 7th best batter could, because they could just be a specialist hitter. So they've got a completely different skill set that actually could work as an impact. However, I do think that the overseas players being available as an impact sub when you've already picked 4 to start with, or my dream world would be 5, would go a long way to really potentially defining the name of impact, if you like, and having someone who can really change the direction of a match.
I think that is the majority of questions that we've got covered that have come through before this has happened. Dan, thank you ever so much for joining all the way from Vegas.
Anytime, mate, anytime.
Always love having you. The big question is going to be how much money you end up winning in Vegas. So we wish you all the very best. And where can people find you? If they follow the podcast, they more than likely follow you.
Well, yeah. If there are any stragglers, it's at SA Advantage on Twitter, and my Substack is danweston.substack.com.
Brilliant. Well, thank you ever so much, everybody, for joining us. There's kind of 100 people doing it, so we really appreciate Kartik, Parav, Vic, Nick, Parav. Who else we got? Cool Kid on here, Mohammed,